Hello and welcome to the Vaults of Terra. My name is Ed and today we're going to be looking at the Primarch, specifically the First Legion's Primarch known as Lionel Johnson. Now we will be going through all the Primarchs in order, starting with Legion 1 and going all the way up to Legion 20, although we will for now skip Legion 2 and Legion 11 as they will have their own separate video after all the others. So, on to Lionel Johnson. Now, Lionel Johnson is the Primarch of the Dark Angels, which is also known as the First Legion. He was later known as the Lion, or just the First, as the Primarch of the First Legion. He was cast very far from Terra after the Primarchs were sucked up from the Emperor's laboratory and cast into the warp. He landed on the forest world of Caliban, a planet vibrant with life but touched by chaos. He was one of the most strategically minded Primarchs, but was considered grim, arrogant, and secretive by his brother Primarchs. Now, Lion's growth capsule came to rest in a remote part of Caliban's forest, far from civilization but deep within the woodlands that were touched by chaos. Any other person would have died in minutes, so deep into the forests, let alone just a newborn child. However, the Primarch was no ordinary human, and within moments of emerging from the tank, he had the appearance of a young child, past infancy and heading towards their teenage years. There, with no one around him, he survived. His instincts and thoughts implanted by the Emperor keeping him alive as he aged rapidly. A decade after his arrival, he was found by a group of humans, knights led by a man named Luther, who wore crude power armor left over from an age-long past. The knights would have killed the man as chaos tainted, but Luther sensed something in him and spared the Primarch's life. Taking him back to their fortress monastery, Luther named the boy Lionel Johnson. The Primarch quickly adapted to the world of man and the customs of their lives. He learnt extremely rapidly. Soon it was as if he had been born amongst these people, living and speaking as they did. He also quickly began to show his tactical brilliance, acting quickly and showing determination in his actions, rising quickly through the ranks of this knightly order, with soon both his and Luther's name being known throughout other orders on Caliban. However, he never did share what happened to him in those 10 years within Caliban's forests. Also, ironically, they undertook in a great purging, or crusade, against the chaos-tainted beasts of their lands, using the recruits their order had gained with Lion's fame to push back for the first time the domain of these beasts, easing the fear of Caliban's people for the first time in generations. Within a decade, the planet was actually free of the beasts, and Lion was made Supreme Grand Master for his achievements. Although proud of his young friend, it could be said that this moment may have sparked a jealousy in Luther that would come back to haunt Caliban in later times. Now, not long after the cleansing of the beasts, the Emperor arrived on Caliban, receiving word from his scouts that one of his sons had been found. After the pair met, Lion was immediately given control of the First Legion, made from his gene seed, and they were named the Dark Angels, supposedly after an old Caliban myth. The older knights, including Luther, were given genetic manipulation to fight alongside the newly created Astartes recruited from Caliban, although they would not be as strong or as fast as these newly born legionaries. Although some tried to fight the changes from knights to marines, including trying to assassinate both the Emperor and Lionel Johnson, their failures only strengthened the unity of this newly formed legion. Now, during the Great Crusade, there were many victories made by the Dark Angels under Lion's leadership. However, Luther, Lion's second-in-command, still harboured jealousy over his friend's position. This jealousy nearly led to the destruction of the Legion's flagship and caused a rift between the two, leading Lion to send Luther away, along with a force of Caliban native marines, sending them back to Caliban itself, ostensibly to train new recruits for the Legion. However, Luther's jealousy told him that he had been exiled and deeply resented this treatment. Meanwhile, Lion went from victory to victory in the crusade. However, his stoic nature and self-admitted trouble with understanding emotion led him to not being considered for the position of War Master. When Horus was appointed, although deeply disappointed, thinking of his legion status as the first qualified him for the status, the Lion accepted Horus getting this role as the Emperor's favoured son. In fact, it was a similar attitude to Leman Russ, ironically. Now, the reason for that is that Lion and Leman Russ had a tumultuous history. Now, Leman Russ was the Primarch of the Space Wolves. Both the Space Wolves and the Dark Angels Legion converged to jointly assault a world that had insulted the Emperor and had begun sacrificing to a demon. The ruler of the planet even called Russ the Emperor's lapdog, leading this fiery Primarch of the Space Wolves to promise to remove the leader of the world's head from their shoulders personally. He wanted to immediately lead a full frontal assault on the leader's command center himself, which would cost much life, but would allow him to seek his revenge. However, the Dark Angels were already in preparation, with the Lion having planned a strategically brilliant assault on the compound in order to minimise the loss of life and maximise the potential damage. The Dark Angel's assault went ahead before Lehman could object, and the Lion personally slew the leader on the high walls of his own compound. Enraged by this, Russ confronted Lion after the battle and struck the Dark Angel's Primarch on the head. The two of them fought for a day and a night, beating each other to a standstill. Russ even laughed during the pause in the fighting, finding the reasons for the fight humorous to himself in the end. However, the stoic Lion was not amused, and struck whilst the Space Wolf's Primarch was laughing, knocking Lehman Russ unconscious. When he finally came to, the Dark Angels had left, moving on to other battles. Finding the act dishonourable, Russ swore that he would avenge this slight, and from then on the Primarchs fought whenever they met off the battlefield, later becoming an honour duel between the members of each chapter. Some say this brought the two chapters together, others say the hostilities between the two has sometimes even led to bloodshed. Now, moving back to Caliban, it had been 50 years since Luther's exile, and it was discovered that the Chaos Beasts had returned to the planet. The people began to feel that the Lion had abandoned them for a greater role in the Crusade, which Luther did nothing to quell. When Horus rebelled, it was discovered that warp sorcery was being used to resurrect these beasts on Caliban, possibly by order of Horus himself. However, rather than fighting these sorcerers, Luther decided to ally with the treacherous Warmaster to take his revenge on the Lion, stirring up the trouble with the people and making them seek rebellion against the Imperium. Now, during the heresy, the Lion tried to deny the Warmaster access to the siege weapons he would need to assault the palace on Terra by taking the Forge World of Diamat, who had a store of these weapons. The Lion believed that if the Emperor was safe in the Imperial Palace, Horus would never win the title as Master of Mankind. However, after securing the weapons, the Lion was deceived into giving them to the Iron Warriors, who had quietly sided with Horus. The Lion saw a chance to become Warmaster if Horus was cast down, so traded the weapons to Perturabo, who was the Primarch of the Iron Warriors, for his future support if a new Warmaster was to be chosen. The Lion then left Diamat to rejoin the rest of his legion elsewhere, with the aim to move on to Terra afterwards. However, the fleet encountered demons within the warp, and to defeat them the Lion was forced to reinstitute the legion's librarians, who had been disbanded following the Council of Nicaea. Later, after gathering his forces, the Lion was confronted by Conrad Kurz, Primarch of the Night Lords. After the half-mad Primarch revealed a dark prophecy about the Dark Angels themselves, talks broke down and Kurz badly wounded the Lion before escaping. The Lion returned, using an archaeotech device to overpower the Night Lord's fleet. Kurz escaped into the bowels of the Invincible Reason, the Lion's flagship, and killed all parties searching for him. The Lion spent 16 weeks hunting the Night Haunter himself, but found no trace of him. As the Reason pursued the rest of the Night Lord's fleet, they were confronted by more demons, including Karios Fateweaver, a Zinchian Lord of Change, who had tried to convert the Dark Angel's Primarch to the way of chaos. However, the Lion believed that loyalty brought its own reward, and the demon found no purchase for its treacherous words in the Lion's stoic heart, eventually being impaled through the heart by the Lion himself. Eventually, the Lion was able to make it to Ultramar, being unable to reach Terra. There, joining with the Ultramarines and the Blood Angels, they briefly formed the Imperium Secundus, from which Lionel Johnson was declared their military commander. However, sometime later, the Siege of Terra began, but the Dark Angels were not able to arrive before the siege was over, with many millions dead, including some of his brothers, and the Emperor interred on the Golden Throne. The Lion was racked with grief at what had happened, and had finally returned to Caliban to replenish his troops. However, on his arrival, his fleet came under attack from his own defence batteries. Luther, who had sworn loyalty to the forces of chaos, had poisoned the minds of the natives, saying the Lion had abandoned them. The Primarch saw the taint of chaos had reinfused Caliban, and in his fury he unleashed the wrath of his fleet on the planet, destroying everything in an attempt to rid the world of the taint. Reducing the world's defences to nothing, the Lion personally led the attack on the enemy's stronghold. There he found Luther consumed completely by chaos, with nothing of his old friend left. They fought, and the combat levelled the fortress around them, the might of chaos meeting Emperor-forged fury. The planet too writhed under the orbital bombardment, with earthquakes felling mountains and the great forests burning to cinders as the hardened forces of the Dark Angels destroyed their home to end its evil. Now, the physical fight between Lion and Luther was eventually ended by a psychic assault from Luther, leaving the Lion unconscious. However, seeing his former friend fall, Luther was suddenly snapped back to his senses, and was unable to land a killing blow, realising the evil he had done in the name of jealousy. The Chaos Gods, enraged again by the failure of their servants, sent a massive warp storm to ravage the world of Caliban. After the bombardment, the world was so weakened that the planet cracked like glass, being ripped apart by otherworldly energies of the warp. Only the Monastery of the Order, where Luther and the Line had fought, survived as a single structure, and only then because of the massive force fields that kept what remained of its foundations intact after Luther and Line's titanic battle. Within the ruins of what now was a battered asteroid, the Dark Angels found Luther mumbling, driven mad by his actions, saying that the Line had been taken by the Watchers in the Dark and that he would one day return to forgive Luther of his sin. They found no trace of their Primarch, and so decided to make the asteroid their new home, christening it the Rock, the fortress monastery of the Dark Angels. Those Dark Angels who had been converted by Luther to Chaos, or who had joined willingly, were sucked into the warp and were scattered throughout space and time as the Fallen. And of the Lion, a very select few know that he still lives, sleeping within the centre of the Rock, for when the Watcher in the Dark wake him, he will fight in the final battle of the Imperium. And as far as we know, he is the only Primarch who is confirmed still living within the Imperium at the time of the 41st millennium. That's everything I have to say on the lore of Lionel Johnson. Just some trivia actually. His name derives from Lionel Johnson, which sounds exactly the same, but if you take the L from the last name and put it on the first name, it is the name of the writer of the poem Dark Angel. There we are. So that's everything I wanted to say on Lionel Johnson today. If you have any questions for me, leave them in the comment section below or send me a personal message, which will be very useful, okay? Well, thank you for listening today. See you next time on the Vaults of Terra.